G'day Trailblazers, my name is Cam, and for today's video I'll be doing an introduction into AMPscript, showing you as a new user how you can use AMPscript in Salesforce Marketing Cloud to personalize your emails. So I'm going to be demonstrating a few functions inside of Salesforce Marketing Cloud which may require a bit of existing knowledge before you get started. So before watching today's video, I recommend you jump onto Trailhead, you check out some of the AMPscript courses you can do for yourself right now. There are heaps of trails and modules dedicated to AMPscript, which I recommend you do first before continuing with this video. Additionally, there's some great documentation on the Salesforce website for AMPscript. Put links to these in the description below for you to check out as we go through today's content. So before we get started looking at AMPscript inside Marketing Cloud, let's do a quick recap on what AMPscript is. Now, it's a proprietary language inside Salesforce Marketing Cloud that allows you to personalize and create dynamic content in your emails, landing pages, and SMSs. The great thing about this is it works just like a mail merge function, which goes back to the 1980s, which allowed you to have a table of data which you could then mail merge or look up into a word processing document. Now, luckily for us, these functions, AMPscript and mail merging, are very common in email marketing platforms. So if you have been using a different email marketing platform in the past, you're probably very familiar with how this works already. But let's go through what it looks like inside Salesforce Marketing Cloud. To demonstrate AMPscript inside Marketing Cloud, we're going to need two things. Some data to personalize with, of course, and some content to put it in. So those two things you have to build first before we can start demoing this inside Marketing Cloud. So we'll start off with a data extension, or our data to personalize with. I've got a demo data extension already called my sample rows, which I will link in the description below, which has some great sample data which we'll use for today's demonstration. So to do this, we'll be creating a new data extension and loading this data into it. So let's start off by creating a new data extension and putting these fields in. We can jump into our Marketing Cloud. We are in Subscribers under Email Studio, of course. We're going to go under Subscribers into our data extensions and create our brand new data extension in the top right-hand corner. So we'll go create a new standard data extension. I'm going to create a sample rows. Data extension called sample rows. I want this data extension to be sendable and testable. That's very important for our exercise today. I'll then go next. We don't need data retention policies for today's demo, so we'll skip this screen and go next once more. And here is our fields for our data extension. Now, looking back on the documentation on GitHub, I'm going to have a couple of columns to put in here. We can start off by having a look at the content of each column. We have an ID field, which looks like a string to me, that's text. A first name, which of course is text. A row, which is text. An email address, which looks like an email address. A join date, which is a date data type. And an email opt-in, which contains true and false values. That's a Boolean field. So we'll go through and remake this data extension now. I can quite simply copy the field name in GitHub, jump over into Marketing Cloud, and paste in that as the field name. Now, this was, of course, an ID field, which has a text field. And how long should it be? Well, if we check it out for ourselves, it's definitely less than 50 characters, so we can leave the default there as 50 characters long. And because the ID field is a unique field, we'll make sure we tick the primary key selection box here, because it will be a unique field, one for each subscriber. Now, our next field here is the first name field. So again, I can double click and copy that text, go in and paste it into my data extension. Again, a length of 50 for this text field is pretty good for a first name, so we'll leave it as 50 for now. Going back into the role, again, I can copy and paste it into my data extension, leaving the default as 50 characters long. Back in now to my data, my email address. I can copy and paste my email address in. This will be a different data type though, so I have to choose my selector here and go down and scroll down to email address as my data type, which defaults to 254 characters long. You can leave that as it is now. Back into my data, second last column is my join date. This is a date type field, so go into my data extension, paste the value as the name, and change it to a date type. And there we go, it's all changed there as well. Last field is our email opt-in. This one's our Boolean field. So again, I'll paste it in and change it to a Boolean data type. Now, what I can do with my data as well, if I take a quick look, there's no empty fields here, but in case there was, it'd be very important to make sure I tick my nullable boxes. I'll do them just for now to make sure it is going to be an easy upload for today, but you don't have to because our data for today does not have any nulls. Last thing before we press save is to make a send relationship for our data for today. We do want to relate the ID field to subscriber key. So we easily choose the ID field relates to subscribers on subscriber key, just like that, and we'll go create. As easy as that, we now have some sample data to play with for today's personalization. With our data extension created, we can now upload some sample data into our data extension to use for today's personalization in AMPscript. To do this, I'll jump back into GitHub and we can see our data here. But if I want to extract this and then load it into Marketing Cloud, I can quite simply click on the raw button to view this CSV data as a raw CSV file. And here it is here. I then right click on this page and choose to save as and save my sample rows.csv onto my computer. With that file saved, I can jump back into Marketing Cloud and I can choose to import some data into my data extension. So I'll choose the import button here. I can then choose to import from my desktop into this data extension by choosing the My Computer option and clicking on Browse. Once you click on Browse, we can then choose our sample rows data extension and choose the Open button to open that file. Now our data for today is a comma delimited, it's a CSV file. Now it's going to be in the Australian English date format, so make sure you do choose the correct date format in the selector below. Once you have chosen the English Australian option, which is at the top, there it is there, you can also choose the import type. Now because our sample rows data extension had no data to begin with, we can choose the overwrite data type for today, as there's nothing in there to replace. Now we can also choose the respect double quotes as text qualifier, just in case there is some double quotes in there. There isn't for today, but it's always a safe option to tick. With that done, we'll go next to begin to import our data. Before we do, we have to map out our fields. Now the good news is, because we copied those field names from the GitHub resource directly into Marketing Cloud, the names will perfectly match, as you can see here. So we can choose the map by header row option. I'll then choose next and we can review our data before clicking the import button. Once we do, it's going to begin importing that data into our data extension. After a few seconds, you can choose to click on the folder that you saved your data extensions into to refresh the view on your screen, to hopefully see 13 records uploaded into our data extension. You can click into that data extension by clicking on the name and then choosing the records tab at the top, just to check how many records were imported. We have all 13, it looks like there's no gaps, so all the data has come through perfectly. The second thing we need to do some AMPscript personalization in Marketing Cloud is an email to personalize our data and content into. Now for today, I'll be using the How to Create Your First Email in Marketing Cloud sample email that I built about a year ago. I'll put the link to that video in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. You can also jump onto reallygoodemails.com, and I'll put this link in the description as well. You can rebuild this email right now today. But as mine is already built, I'm going to jump into my existing email here. Let's start personalizing with AMPscript. So the first thing I want to take you through is the syntax of AMPscript inside Marketing Cloud. If you jump over to the AMPscript documentation on the Salesforce website, we can have a look at the syntax guide. We can have a look at our function calls to see some examples of what it looks like inside of Marketing Cloud. Now AMPscript is always denoted by 2% signs. You'll see it denoted just like this, 2% signs to open and 2% signs to close. So whenever you see 2% signs side by side, you know it's AMPscript inside Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Now there are a couple of ways I want to really focus on today as we go through learning AMPscript. The first one is going to be how to use AMPscript to look up a field or personalization string. What you'll see is a value with 2% signs either side. You may not see those square brackets, but you should see %%, a value, and then %%. That's an inline function which will allow you to retrieve a value from a data extension or a personalization string. The second thing you may see commonly is going to be %% equals, followed by something, and then equals %%. This is a function call in line for AMPscript or a function call outside of an AMPscript block. You can see some examples here where we're using a lowercase function, which again we can tell is an inline function because of the %% equals to open and then equals %% to close. Again, very important, that syntax of opening and closing that function. Now third of all is going to be the AMPscript block. Now the AMPscript block is going to be %% square bracket followed by some code and then the square bracket %% to close. So again, those three ways that the syntax is %% field name, %% equals, or %% square bracket. So with the AMPscript syntax firmly in our mind, let's now jump into Marketing Cloud and check it out for ourselves. We'll jump back into Content Builder, back into my sample email. Let's find ourselves a nice text area to put some AMPscript into. So I'll scroll down to my main text area here. I can click on my text block to open it up. My options here for my text editor include this little drop down here. If you can't see it, make sure you expand your text options with this little button. You can see here this little icon for a customer. If I click on this icon, it allows us to specify a data extension that we intend to send this email to. So we can tell Marketing Cloud which data extension we want to use for personalization. If I click on it now, I can choose the option to choose a new data source. Now by choosing this, I can navigate through to the folder that I saved my data extension into and choose the correct data extension. You can see here my sample rows, so I click on that sample rows and then click OK. And so I've now told Marketing Cloud I want to personalize and send emails to this data extension through this email. If I now re-click on this dropdown, I can see the sample rows field in that data extension. There's my ID, my first name, my role, and so on. This makes it much easier for doing personalization in this email. Now, at the moment, there is no personalization at all in this email. It's actually a static email. There's nothing personalized, nothing dynamic. I can show you this by going down and choosing the next option to preview my email. As you can see, there's nothing fancy happening here at all. Now on the left-hand side, I can choose to personalize this on a subscriber level, which I can do later on, but for now, just note there's no personalization. So let's add some. I'll go back now into my content screen, back into my text block here, and let's add a hi first name piece. So I'll modify my text, and I'll press return to go on to the next line. Let's now say hi first name. Now, of course, hi first name is just going to say hi first name in static text. That's no good to us. We have to put some AMPscript in. Now, the good news is we do know in our data extension that first name is the field name we want to look up. So that's a good start. But the best part is because we've specified to this email that we only use this sample rows data extension, I can actually put that in one click. You quite simply click here and just choose the first name option, and straight away it goes hi %% first name. Now remember, back from our personalization, back from our AMPscript syntax, %% value, % means that we are looking up a string, looking up a value in a data extension, or using a personalization string. We can try it for ourselves now by going and checking our preview screen. So I click on next and go to our preview. Now at the moment it shows our code as it is like this, because we have not chosen a subscriber to preview our personalization against, to do our mail merge against. So let's now jump into our data extensions and choose a subscriber to render on. We choose the blue folder here on the side. By choosing this, we then navigate through to our folder, back to where our data extension is saved. So I go into my data extensions where I've saved my data extension, and here it is here, sample rows. So I choose sample rows, and now I can choose a subscriber to render against. So I'm going to choose Astro as my first subscriber by clicking on that record there and then choosing select. Now straight away, Marketing Cloud does a mail merge on that data extension to return back Astro. And as you can see, hi Astro, hi %% first name. We can check the data for ourselves on our viewer here on the left-hand side. We have first name is equal to Astro, so it's worked. We then navigate to our next subscriber by choosing the next subscriber record here, by choosing the little right-hand arrow. By clicking that, it renders our next record in the data extension, which of course is Einstein, and it says, hi Einstein. You can go again and show hi Appy, and so on and so forth. Of course, I could also choose to go back to my folder here and then choose a future record. Let's go down and we'll render up hi Brandy, and go select, and there it is. Brandy is the first name on the value on the left-hand side. Our AMPscript now shows hi Brandy. So our first personalization script here is working. How good. Let's jump back into Content Builder and try something else. So remember how we just then did a %% value %% example using first name? We sometimes refer to that as a personalization string. Well, here is the documentation on the personalization strings in Marketing Cloud. Now, I'll put a link to this in the description below so you can check the documentation out for yourself as we go through today's example. Let me show you a few of these personalization strings. So for example, a few things you can do is you can put in a dynamically rendered month, day, year, or otherwise using a personalization string. You can also put in the current email's name, the context to which you're currently viewing that email, some preferences, is it test or not, what's the job ID, pre-header, and so much more in these personalization strings. So again, check this out for yourself and read the information and description on each of these strings. For today, let's try a couple of these strings out to show you how it works. So for example, let's bring in the current year for today. So I can go in here and find the personalization string to return back the current year that the email was sent. I can choose this string, go copy, then jump back into my content builder, go into my text field here and say, hi, first name, the year is, and paste in xt year, that personalization string. Then go next to preview this for myself. In my preview screen, I should say, hi, first name, which for our last record I believe was Brandy, and the current year is, of course, 2023. Good-o. Jumping back into our content builder, now take note that the email's name is how to create your first email in Marketing Cloud. I can dynamically bring that into Marketing Cloud using a personalization string by going back to my documentation here and scrolling down, and the email name underscore personalization string allows me to return back the internal name of the email. Okay, so if I was to copy that string, go back in my content builder and say the year is, how about the email is called, and I paste in the email name. Now, if I try this out, it should return back, hi Brandy, the email is called how to create your first email in Marketing Cloud. And there it is there, the email is called your first email in Marketing Cloud. Now, I can show you how this personalization works by jumping back into the properties of this email by clicking on this one here, and how to create your first email in Marketing Cloud 2.0. I'll then go next to save that name of the email. You can see it's changed here in the name as well. I now re-preview this email. I haven't gone and changed the code, but the personalization, that personalization string has brought in the new name of this email, and there it is there. It's changed the value produced from the preview screen. So as you can see, you can use personalization strings to bring back information dynamically at time of render or time of send to change content inside your email. Now finally, I do want to show you one last one, which is a message context. This one's really cool. As you can see, there are different ways that Marketing Cloud can render your email or your cloud page. Send, of course, being the final render of an email, but preview being the preview of that email itself. So if we were to use the message context personalization string inside of our currently previewed email, we should see the value of preview come back. But of course, if we're going to send it as a send, we should see the value of send instead. So this email is a paste. Is it a send or a preview? Let's find out. Of course, we are previewing on our preview screen, so we should see the email is preview. There we are. So of course, that message context currently in the preview screen is a preview type, but it would be a view as a web page or a different send type if it was put in a different context. So again, I do encourage you to go through and check out all these different personalization strings. Check out the link in the description below and have a read for yourself. There are some really cool functions you can do to personalize your content inside Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So back into Marketing Cloud and back into our text content block, let's now put some more values in from that sendable data extension. We've already got hi first name. Let's bring in your role is, and then bring in the role for this person. So we can go back to our lookup here. We can put in the role. You can see there, %% role, which will bring in the role from that data extension. So if we check back in our data for Brandy, Brandy's role is a marketer. So if we go back in and we go send preview, we hopefully will see that for Brandy's personalization record, we see, hi Brandy, your role is, and there it is, marketer, bringing back that value from our lookup. So we've done two text values. Let's now try to bring in the email value, the join date, and the Boolean field. So we'll jump back into our content, and very quickly we can go into our text content block here. Let's go new line, and we'll simply bring in the email address. We'll bring in the join date, and the next line down, we're going to bring in the email opt-in value. Those three things in, I've got nothing else on those lines, I'll just go next. Now what should happen is I should see these lines be brought out, there they are there, with those values. So Brandy, of course, is Brandy. The join date, now we did see the join date as Sunday, January 24th, but the value brought back into Marketing Cloud is just a date. It's an American date format. It's January 24th, 2021. And of course, for our Boolean value, we came back with the capitalized T for true. So we do have the ability to bring those values back. Their formats can change. That's a very important thing when it comes to personalization in Marketing Cloud. Sometimes our data isn't exactly as we want to use it. We want to change some values. For example, it's rare to capitalize email addresses. We don't normally see a capital B for Brandy in an email address like this. We would instead see a lowercase version of Brandy's email. So how can we modify Brandy's email on the fly inside Marketing Cloud so it shows exactly what we want to show our customer when they receive the email? Well, let's jump back in and have a look at some of the functions we have access to inside Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Back on the documentation page for Marketing Cloud's AMPscript functions, we can scroll down the left-hand side and we can find some reference material for our functions. Here's our AMPscript reference. I can expand that reference and see all the items here, or I can click on the AMPscript function reference button here to load a new page which contains all of our functions. Now there are heaps and heaps of functions and there are always new ones being added, so make sure you keep referencing back to this page to see what's been added in each release. At the moment, we do want to do a content or a string change. So I can scroll down on my main page here or scroll down through our menu. So I'm going to do a change of Brandy's email address, changing it to a lowercase version. So I can scroll all the way down and we're using a string function. So if I keep going down, I will find a string and here's our string functions here. Now we could choose to lowercase Brandy's email. They're changing the uppercase B to a lowercase b for the email address. I can see here's how the function's used. It is the syntax of lowercase. So I can copy this, and go back into my Marketing Cloud content builder, and put this function in. Now remember, this is not going to be a string, so we don't do %% and then put in lowercase because there's no field called lowercase 1. It's a function, and according to our syntax, a function is declared by doing %% equals followed by equals %%. That's lowercase. You're not going to lowercase what? We're not going to lowercase 1, that's just the syntax of the lowercase function. We can see here from the example that we could specify a value, which we'll do by looking up the field of email address. And we can see here, we've got the email address field. So let's put in lowercase and then email address. I'll remove the existing one above, so we have email address, the original, and then we have our lowercase version. Let's try it for ourselves now by going in and checking on the next button to preview our email. We should now see the email address as it was with the uppercase B in the original, and now the lowercase version with the lowercase b. And there we go, there's our two values. The original value being uppercase and the new value being lowercase. So we can bring in functions into our AMPscript code in line to change data in our data extension to show how we want our subscribers to see it in the email. Back on our function screen now, let's try a different string function. Perhaps we instead want to uppercase the function. So maybe we're going to uppercase the role for Brandy, so we show that the role of marketer is all in upper caps. Let's have a look at our string functions, and we have a whole lot of functions here, including our uppercase. There it is there. Uppercase function is called in a very, very similar way. We can choose to uppercase by using the uppercase code for our function. So copy that name uppercase, go back into our content and have a look at that AMPscript code. And rather than saying role as it was, we can say we want to uppercase. So %% equals uppercase, which will now be our upper output. We can uppercase the email address. No, let's uppercase the role. So we'll have the original role and the uppercase role. With that done, let's go next to preview our email and see if we've now got Brandy's role as marketer. The original, of course, being in normal case, and there is our uppercase version. Very cool. There's one thing you may have seen as we went through those examples through the AMPscript string functions. They often use this @ symbol being used. Now in Marketing Cloud, when it comes to personalization, you can use the @ symbol to declare variables inside of Salesforce Marketing Cloud's AMPscript. So let me show you how that works by using a code block inside of our AMPscript. Jumping into our email content here, jumping back into my text, let's make ourselves a different syntax for our AMPscript. Rather than using the %% equals to make a function, let's make a code block instead. So I'm going to drop all this back to our original hi first name. Let's add in a code block. So it's going to be %% square bracket, then some code, followed by the square bracket and %%. Now in here will be our code block. What we could do to start things off, to make it nice and easy, let's make a new variable for our first name. So first of all, a variable inside AMPscript is declared by an @ symbol. So I could say @ symbol fn will be for first name. To do this inside of AMPscript, we have to set the variable. So we're going to say set fn to be what? We're going to set the variable of fn to be something. Well, at the moment, of course, we do have the data extension field name called first name. So we can say that the fn variable in AMPscript will be equal to the field in data extension for the subscriber called first name. So with fn set, I can then declare that value later on down here. There's a function we have to use to write out a variable inside Marketing Cloud. I can jump back into my syntax here, back in my function reference, we want to use the v function to output a value. V for value, we want to print a value out, to output the value of a variable. You can see it being used for an example here. We set a value called hello, and then printed that value using the v function. So back into our content builder, back into our email, not hi %% first name, we're going to make a function. So it's of course hi % equals, and then equals %%. And of course we're going to be using the v function with round brackets. And the v function is to print what variable? Well, it's the @fn. So we paste @fn inside the v function there, and that will now print our first name. So you can see here, a v function will print this variable being set as first name, which was of course a field in our data extension. Let's try that now with Brandy by going next to preview the content of this email, and hopefully we'll see the code block here collapses. It's now gone, and we won't show the code block to our customers. It's all been rendered in the background, and the result is hi Brandy for first name. Of course, there's Brandy's first name. Go back one, and there's hi Appy. Hi Appy. Perfect. So again, that code block is not showing in the email. Those spaces there were because I left those spaces in my original text. If I go back in, I can see some spaces here. If I remove those spaces, then I will no longer see those spaces come through. So there's now no spaces. If I go next, I should see there's now absolutely no gap. between my header and my hi function. There it is there. So there's no spaces above. It just says hi appy because I've removed those spaces. And again, that code block disappeared as soon as I rendered that email. So as you can see, we can now set variables inside of Marketing Cloud to then use later on in the email. I could change this though to say rather than hi first name, I could say hi Cam. Now there isn't a value in my data extension called Cam, there's no subscriber called Cam, but I can use a static value for my AMPscript instead. So back in my content, I can say first name is equal to, and I can use my quotation marks here to say Cam, just like that. And so now for every subscriber, the static text of Cam will be used as the hi first name value. I can try that by going next and check that for myself. Of course, we had Appy as our current subscriber, and now Appy is Cam. Next one was Brandy. Brandy is also Cam. So again, we can set the variables to come from our data extension. We can use those personalization strings to bring back data from Marketing Cloud, or we can also set static values by using those quotation marks. Now, of course, quotation marks for a string, I could use a number or a date by doing different formats, and I'll show you those a little bit later on. So we've gone through how to set up the personalization using data extensions and email content, how to use the inline personalization strings, inline functions, and of course the AMPscript code block all in your email. I want to show you one more thing before we close off today's learning session. That's a bit of logic we can do inside of Salesforce Marketing Cloud using AMPscript. It's going to be called an if statement. So jumping into our documentation, we scroll back up to the top of our AMPscript menu here and go back to our AMPscript syntax guide. We're going to look at the AMPscript language elements. In the language elements, there is a function called an if statement, an if syntax. It allows us to do some conditional processing or some logic inside of our Marketing Cloud email. I want to show you how that works. So before we do though, let's go back into our content. Let's bring in one of our values. We did have a field in the data extension, which was called the email opt-in field, which had a true and false value. Let's have a quick look inside of our Marketing Cloud by bringing that in using AMPscript. So let's instead have a new value here. We'll just say set and at email. Let's go email opt-in is going to be equal to the email opt-in value from data extension. We could of course go back and copy this value from data extension, or because we have chosen data extension as our source for today's email, we can choose to drop in the email opt-in value just here. You can click that, of course. We don't need the %% signs because we are inside of a code block already. This is already AMPscript, so drop those two out. And the email opt-in value will be email opt-in. So hi first name, comma, you are opt-in equals what? Well, we can copy our value function here, just like that. So %% equals v to print out a value, not printing out our first name value. Let's print out the email opt-in value, copy and paste that there, just like that. So now it's going to read, you are opt-in, true or false. Let's have a look. We'll go next, and for our value here, we're still showing, of course, Cam as the static first name for these subscribers. But for our test record of Brandy, the email opt-in was true. You can see your email opt-in equals true. Good, so we have a value coming back. That value is, of course, the true value. What we can do inside Marketing Cloud, though, is change how that true value is used. Right now, it says string value of true or false to represent a Boolean flags of true or false. Are you opted in, yes or no? Well, we don't want to just represent the value of email opt-in true or false. Let's do some calculations, some logic, and change how that's shown. We can do this with the if statement. So inside of our code block in AMPscript, inside the email, let's make some logic. Now I'll jump back into our AMPscript documentation and have a look at that if statement. We can see some examples here of how it's written. Now I do have a whole separate video that introduces how if statements work. I'll put a link to that one in the description below. You can check it out for yourself, but I'll summarize how it works here as well. So the if statement is written by writing the if statement, the if command word, followed by an expression to see if something is true or false. If it's true or false, or if it's true, we then want to do something, otherwise do something else. Let's write out those keywords, the if something, then something, and else something. So we'll jump back into our email and let's try and type it out for ourselves. So those 4 keywords again were, if a condition is going to be true, then we're going to do the true function for that condition, else, if it's not true, we're going to do the false function. Instead, once it's all done, we're going to end the if statement. So again, those 4 keywords, if, then, else, and end if. So what is the condition for today? Well, because we want to try and change the email opt-in value, it's going to be if the email opt-in value is something. So we can say if the data extension value for this subscriber is equal to, so 2 equal signs for the condition, is equal to what? Well, equal to true. if the subscriber's email status is equal to true, then what do we want to do? Well, for today, let's not output the email opt-in flag as true or false. Let's print out some words instead. We'll take the set function from above. Let's paste it down below here. So if true, then we'll set email opt-in to be equals to a string of text, which could be, you are opted into emails. There we are. Now, of course, if the subscriber's string for the email opt-in flag is not true, or else, what should we do instead? Well, let's do the false function of this, which of course would be the opposite of you are opted in, which is you are not opted into emails. Easy as that. So that done, we're now going to have the email opt-in variable being set to be either the true or false value, you are opted in or you are not opted in. So we don't have to say that you are opted in, yes or no, we can instead just put the email opt-in value below just like that. % equals and printing out the declared variable for @email opt-in. Now, with that all done, let's try out our if function by going next and to try it out for ourselves. Now, hopefully we see, here we are. So for Brandy, which we had left that personalization there as first name Cam, but Brandy was email opt-in equals true, so you are opted into emails. Let's go have a look at some more records though. What do we have for our other subscribers? If I navigate back to my folder here and I find my sample rows, there it is. We did try Brandy and we knew that Brandy was opted in equals true, but here's a record that's false. Cloudy is not opted into emails. Let's choose Cloudy's record and go select. And now we should see you are not opted into emails, as we can see from the false flag here. So our if statement is working against that value. We've gone back and we've checked and said that if the email opt-in value for this subscriber is equal to true, then show the true. If false, then show the false. So we can build some logic using AMPscript to personalize our emails even further in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So let's show you one more thing before we close out today's video on AMPscript. We have a look at our AMPscript if function here, the if, then, else, and end if. We can see it's all within one single code block. Now, there's one cool trick when it comes to AMPscript, and that's the code blocks can remember where they were when you open and close them. So for example, our first code block here set our fn value to be equal to cam, which we then use later on, and it then also contained our if statement. What we could do though, rather than using the value down here for email opt-in, which we rendered and set above, we could actually do this all with a code block in line. So I'll show you how that looks. What we can do is we can copy out this AMPscript code from our first code block. We can cut that part out, and we'll instead make a new code block down here. So I'll go %, open up that code block just like that, and I can then paste in the code that we cut from above. So what we can now say is hi first name, comma, and then we'll have our code block. And our code block's going to have the are you opted into emails, yes or no. So what we can do is rather than saying setting a variable, we can instead just print out this text. So in our current code block, we've opened it up and we then say if email opt-in is equal to true, then, and we can actually close out that code block by going square brackets and close. Now we've left AMPscript and we've gone back to HTML back in our email. So we can then HTML and just put out the you're opted into emails. We then have to return to AMPscript to check our else statements. So we can then go %, and reopen our AMPscript statement, returning back to AMPscript, where we then say else. And what do we do if else? Well, we print out this text, which of course is some more HTML. So let's then close off AMPscript code and restart HTML, which is where we are now. We'll then show that text. Otherwise, of course, we have to end if, which of course we can do with the closing of our opening of our code block to then close it again for end if. So as you can see, we've now got AMPscript intertwined within our HTML. So we have our AMPscript code block starting and beginning our if statement block. The if statement code block continues through this HTML to the else statement, continues through again into the end if. We then do not need to print out the email opt-in value as it's not been declared. We've instead printed out that text in line. As you can see, of course, we have got this across many the individual rows here, many individual lines in our code. Let's see how it renders when we do this in our preview screen. So we go next and have a look for ourselves. All those code blocks, of course, collapse, and we instead have our result. Now, of course, the false value here meant that you are not opted in for emails. If we go to a true record, you are opted into emails. So we still have that value coming out, but rather than declaring it as a variable and then using the v function, we can also open and close our AMPscript block to do it in line, just like this. And that'll do it for today's introduction for AMPscript. Join me next time as we cover off the format function inside of AMPscript to change the way that your strings, dates, and numbers are shown for your email subscribers, and then how to look up different attributes and values in different data extensions using the lookup function. I hope you enjoyed today's first part of an introduction to AMPscript. If you have, please let me know in the comments below with a big thumbs up on the video. And don't forget that you can subscribe to the channel so that you are notified when I release more Salesforce Marketing Cloud content.